Welcome to the Deerfield Theater podcast. In this season, we're talking about Theater D's production of Our Town. In case you're tuning in and didn't already know, Deerfield Theater is putting on a production of Our Town this March and April of 2025. And performances start Friday, March 28th and go through Sunday, April 13th. So while you're listening to this episode, visit the link in the show notes and get your tickets. Without further delay, here's the episode. Thrilled to have back on the Deerfield Theater podcast, Susie Mason. Susie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. It's good to be back again.
So for everybody who wants to know Susie's background and what she's doing as president, now co-president of the board, although I guess we do kind of have some updates in that regard we could talk about, go back and listen to the previous episode that we had Susie on, link to that in the show notes. But with that, Susie, just in case they don't go back and listen to that episode, just give us like a high level view of your history with Deerfield Family Theater, and then let's talk about Our Town.
Okay, well, I got involved with Deerfield Family Theater, about 22 years ago when my oldest daughter, Samantha, auditioned for Oklahoma, and she was the littlest girl. She was going into 4th grade, or she was in 4th grade, I guess. She was the little girl with the red boots, and she had the greatest experience, and I had a great experience. I felt a little bit out of my depth. There were all these people. I was the fangirl, but I was helping paint the set and getting to kind of know that world, and then as time went on, I got more and more involved and ended up uh, being on the board. I was asked a few times before I was on the board to be on the board, finally gave in and said yes, and then been president for what feels like a really long time now too. So, got myself in but deep.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as long as I've been a board member, you've been president and you've done a bang up job. So I'm thrilled that you said yes. And even before we get into Our Town, though, we have recently, and I don't know if we talked about this publicly, and of course we could always edit this out, Susie. But the board for Theater D and Deerfield Family Theater actually recently merged, and now we're Deerfield Theater. And
Right.
so I don't know, do you wanna talk a little bit about, what was behind that decision to merge the board and pool resources?
Sure. Well, we had a lot of overlap already. Um, so Theater D was founded shortly after Deerfield Family Theater. Donna Price and Debbie Goldman were the original Ds of Theater D, and they wanted to do something for adults by adults, really, more of a play or a farce. Most of them were farces in the early
Yeah.
days, for sure. And, they had their own board and until just this past year. And, we had Lainey Hoppert who kind of pushed us to merge. And it makes sense because I know, you and I both were doing things for both. The podcast was for both. I was doing a
Right.
lot of the graphic design for both. And, social media was being done for both. Fundraising was being done for both. So it did make sense to just be like, okay, we should just be one. And so that's where we're at.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense, and that's why we've sort of rebranded the podcast from the DFT podcast to the Deerfield Theater podcast. Because, like you said, we were promoting all the Deerfield shows anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, speaking of promoting shows, we have a great show that is a Deerfield Theater show, but under the Theater D brand. Don't worry,
Right.
everybody. We're gonna have this worked out and figured out in the near future.
We're well, I think gonna keep the legacy brands alive because they
Yeah.
do have meaning for us, at least, if nobody
Yeah.
else.
And if you're not sure what Theater D is, I say the D is for don't bring young kids because it's sort of more mature theme
It is more
sometimes than
mature themes,
yeah,
right.
yeah, right. I mean, teenagers might absolutely love the Theater D shows, but for super young kids, some of it's over their head. Sometimes there's language that's more appropriate for adults. But for folks who have never heard of Our Town, which is the show for the Theater D program this year, like just tell us what's Our Town even about?
So, this past show selection was done before we merged. So, Theater D's previous board chose our town. And I have to say that when I heard about the choice, I was kinda like, "Eh." I remember seeing it in high school. I don't remember too much about it. I don't know if we could find an audience. It seems like it's been overdone. Okay, so that was my reaction. So I assume most people listening to this will have a similar reaction that they probably saw at our town when they were in high school, and they don't really remember it that well, but it feels like it's been done a million times, and it has been done a million times. Um, but what happened to me, and this is the story, was
Okay.
that, as mentioned, I've been doing some of the graphic design for Theater D in addition to doing it for DFT. I did the Noises Off logo last year, which was a lot of fun. And this year, Julie Stevens, who's one of the co-producers with Brian Elliott, she asked me at the beginning of September to come up with an original logo for our town. And because our town has been done a bazillion times, and I didn't really want to do something that has been done the same way as something else was, I wanted a fresh approach. Well, a fresh approach to something that's been done a million times was a good challenge for me. So I said, okay, let me look and see what's out there. I looked at all the stuff I could find, past logos, and most of them featured kind of the young in love couple, Emily and George. They're the kind of the heart of the show. And they are standing in most of the stuff I saw online on the ladders, which is a feature of this show where there's no specific set. So the second floor is indicated by ladders in many, many versions of the show. Not necessarily all. I don't know if ours is going to, but I think it probably will because most of them do. So I was looking at all of those. And also Arlene Fine, who is on the Theater D board, was taking my art class at the time. And she said, Susie, read Tom Lake. So Tom Lake is by one of my favorite authors, Ann Patchett, and I love her work. Love, love, love her work. So I was going to read Our Town. I was going to read Tom Lake. I was going to New York to visit my oldest daughter, we mentioned a minute ago too, who introduced me to DFT. And I brought Tom Lake and I brought Our Town, and I read and read and read and read on the plane, and I read on the subway, and I read everywhere that I could read. And I fell in love with Our Town and Tom Lake. And Tom Lake, Our Town is kind of a character in Tom Lake. If you haven't read Tom Lake, I highly recommend it. It added layers on layers of appreciation to me reading them both pretty much at the same time. Made me appreciate Our Town, I think, a little bit more, and it made me appreciate Tom Lake certainly more. And so I was talking to Samantha about all of this, and then she read them both, and she was lucky enough to get to see them on Broadway too. So we had a lot of good conversations about Our Town and about Tom Lake and about how they did it in the play. And so I came back with ideas. I came back with ideas because one of the things about both books was really important is that we, everybody, don't notice the things in our lives that are part of our just everyday life that are so special and meaningful, but we miss them because we're busy. We're busy doing a million other things. We're we're not noticing what's right in front of us, which is really, I think, the heart of the show, the heart of Our Town. And so when I came back, I had a couple of ideas, and one of the ideas was a tree that's kind of an optical illusion, where if you look closely, you'll see in the branches a couple of faces, the face of Emily, the face of George, who are the main in love couple. And there's some, there's like a heart between them. So there's a couple of little things. If you really look carefully, you can see them. But if you don't, you'll just see a pretty tree. But I wanted there to be kind of that idea of things are more than they seem. And if you pay attention, there's other things that you'll find. So that's kind of was my main story. But in doing all of the research before I did the logo, my feeling about our town changed 100% to where I totally fell in love. And I've been in love ever since. And I appreciate it in a way that I never could have appreciated it when I saw it when I was in high school because I'm old now. And I've had life experiences, I've had loss, and it means so much more now. So that's my story.
And that's the power of art, right? Like, you could experience art, the same exact art, but be in a different stage of your life, and it has totally new meaning.
It really does. I mean, I I loved it so much. By the time I was done with that deep dive, I loved it so, so much, and I had kind of been thinking about doing, um, a show, as, performing, and I've only done musicals up to this point. I've done some readers theater, and I had taken an acting class for years, but I had not done an actual play, and I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna try, I'm gonna audition, I'm gonna see what happens." You always learn something, and the monologue that they had everyone prepare for the audition, I loved it so much. I'm like, "Oh, I just wanna stay in this monologue forever. I love this monologue, it's so beautiful." Um, so there's just been a lot of that for me. The words, every time I deep dive into any part of it, I just come out of it more and more in love. So
So you're not just doing the logo for the show, you're also in the performance then.
I'm
So what
in the performance, I'm in the ensemble. I have a little teeny bit to do, but it's it's just exciting to again, to be part of this thing that has become so important to me and so meaningful, and to get to be part of the experience of sharing it with others and hoping that they get to experience some of this beauty in a fresh way too.
if you wanna see the logo that Susie's been talking about, you gotta go to deerfieldtheater.com, and it's gonna be right there, and you're gonna see what we're talking about. And while you're looking at that logo and looking for the multiple layers of meaning of things that you were used to looking at and being able to actually see things like you've never seen them before, there's a link right next to it where you could click on it to buy your tickets. So everybody should also buy their tickets while they're looking at this logo. Well, that makes
Yeah.
me think of Susie because actually, this is one of those instances where I am not familiar with our town at all. And so there are folks who, like you, maybe they were exposed to it a lot when they were younger and they've kind of forgotten about it. I think there are still plenty of folks like me that don't know anything about our town. And so for those listeners, I still want to hear from you, just like at a high level. Like, what is
Okay,
the
because
story
I don't
about?
wanna give it all away.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, but I still think just in case this is the first episode that we're using to promote, they know nothing
right,
about the show. So we don't we
right.
yeah, so we'll stay spoiler-free territory, but just like, the synopsis, from in your own words without giving too much away.
Okay, thanks. It is a play in 3 acts. The first act is kind of just like a day in Grover's Corners, and it focuses on just the really mundane, parts of life in 1903 in, uh, Grover's Corners, New Hampshire, and, these 2 families, they live next door to each other, and the Webbs and the Gibbses, and they have both got 2 kids, and we get to meet them just doing their normal stuff. And then the second act of the play is love and marriage, and you get to see the love story between George and Emily, who are the neighbors that they fall in love, and that's the only part of the story that I had really remembered from when I was younger. Because on a high school, when you see the high school romance, then you're all invested. Oh, that made
Oh,
sense to
yeah.
me then. And so
Right.
that's kind of, like I said, the heart of the show is these 2 people falling in love and they're young. And then the 3rd act, I'm not gonna tell what it is, but it's another important thing that happens in our lives, and it's just things get kinda sad from there, but
Yeah.
also beautiful. And I think that maybe why, to me now, it has so much additional resonance and so much additional beauty is because I've been in a place where I can appreciate some of the other parts of life having children and having marriage and having loss and what that means in my life. And I think, also right now the world feels scary to me. Maybe not to everybody listening, but it feels pretty scary to me. And um, it was kind of lovely to be able to think about paying attention to the things that are so um, intimate. You know, the world is big and feels a little bit out of control, but in this story, everything is close and intimate and all of us in our daily lives, I think especially with cell phones, with my handy dandy cell phone right here, it's so easy to get kind of lost in the cell phone, lost in Instagram or Facebook or Substack or whatever it is, and not be paying attention to the little things around us more even than it was when Thornton Wilder wrote about it in our town. I think there's always a distraction, something that is pulling us away from what we're doing or being who we're being with. You know, so often, you're doing the day to day, you're taking care of your kids, but are you paying attention to those moments? I used to love when I was, driving my kids around in the car because that seemed like that was sometimes the best conversations because there were no distractions. We was just us talking in the car. Um, so that's kind of our town and me.
It reminds me of that commencement address by David Foster Wallace. Have you ever seen that one, Susie?
No.
I'm gonna have to like add it as a companion, like link in the notes to the YouTube video of that. I'm sure there's other versions of it out there, but he talks about, and he's no longer with us. He talks about in it, and I won't do it justice here, about swimming in water. And like an old fish swims by two young fish, and he goes, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" And swims away. And the one fish looks to the other of the young fish and goes, "What's water?" Because we're swimming in it, and we don't
Right.
realize it, and we don't think about it, and we don't pay attention to things like that. And part of the talk is about looking at the water and breaking free of it and paying attention to the things in your life and the little things, right? Like, and so I think that makes and that's just a few minutes long of a commencement address, and I think it would be a great companion piece to going and seeing our town.
It sounds
Also,
very similar in
yeah,
tone, because that's what this play is about.
yeah. Another thing it makes me think of is, sometimes, and this is just like a little thing. I don't even know if this is in the show because again, I'm not familiar with it. Is sometimes we eat our food so fast that we don't even taste it, and like
Yes,
it could be really delicious food, and if you just slow down a little bit and let it sit in your mouth, you could like actually enjoy the taste. But we're also much in a hurry to get on with our lives, to put the kids to bed. I'm at that stage in my life. Okay, we gotta get the kids to bed. I gotta do a little bit more work. I gotta spend some time with my wife. It's like we just wolf down our food, don't even taste it, but slow
that's it.
down, taste
That's
it,
it.
enjoy the moments a little bit. Yeah.
100%. That's what this story is. That's
Hmm.
that's it in a nutshell. It's about paying attention. And we can't all pay attention all of the time to every single thing, but just having the intention to pay attention, I think is a good starting point. And I do think that recognizing who we're with and recognizing those moments is a gift. And I think this experience has been a gift for me. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, in that case, I think this is applicable to everybody to come and see. And so definitely, I'll be seeing it with, with my wife. Probably will invite some friends from my kids' daycare. So for their parents to go see it. So definitely let folks know about this show. This is applicable anywhere, and in this crazy news cycle world that we live in, Susie. Going back to some people are really worried about what the heck is going to happen in the near future. sometimes it's good to focus on what's right in front of you. So if you want to do that, again, deerfieldtheater.com,
Thanks.
get your
Thank you.
tickets, come see our town. Any final parting thoughts, Susie?
I don't know. I mean, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it makes you think. I hope it makes you appreciate the people and the things around you. And I hope that you leave finding yourself at peace and, hopeful and maybe sad, but also inspired. So, all those things.
Well, thanks again for coming back on the show, Susie.
You're welcome, Matt. Thank you.
And that's our show. Please share this podcast to help support the work of Deerfield Theater. An even better way to support us is to go see our town. To purchase tickets, visit deerfieldtheater.com or click the link in the show notes. Thank you to the production staff and cast for our town. Please follow us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your preferred listening app to never miss an episode. Until next time, thanks to everyone who continues to support the arts. We'll see you at the theater.